Hello everyone, today we're going to start with something that might make you roll your eyes, or sit straight up in your chair. One word. Just one word is the reason you might never hit the goals you daydream about while stuck in traffic. It's the reason you keep starting new plans with enthusiasm, only to quietly quit them 3 weeks later. And no, it's not motivation, or discipline, or hustle. It's not even success. It's something far simpler, far sneakier, and I'll tell you what it is, but first. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments, I want to know where and when you're watching this. Now, let's get comfortable, and let's get started today. I'll be real with you, I wasn't always the type to think deeply about words. I mean, I grew up believing success was pretty straightforward. You work hard, you do what you're told, and eventually, you climb the ladder. That's it. The problem? I was doing exactly that. I was checking every box, hitting every milestone, and I felt completely, irreversibly stuck. The kind of stuck that feels like running through honey in a dream. It all came to a head one random Tuesday. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, because apparently the produce aisle gives me existential dread, and I just sat there, staring at my steering wheel, thinking. Is this it? Is this what the rest of my life is going to feel like? You ever had one of those moments where your whole life feels like a stale bagel? It wasn't depression. It wasn't failure. It was numbness. And that, weirdly, felt scarier than either. That night, while doom-scrolling through the internet instead of meal prepping like a proper adult, I clicked on this article written by some performance coach with a name like Brickstone or something equally intimidating. But in between the motivational cliches and abs, there was one paragraph that caught my eye. Successful people don't just do things differently, they think one word differently. It changes everything. Now, you'd think that would be followed by some deep philosophical treatise, but no. The article ended. No word. No clue. Classic Brick. But that line, it stuck. So I did what any person spiraling into self-discovery would do. I opened a fresh notebook, drew a big dramatic title that said, The Word, and started writing every single word I could think of that successful people might interpret differently than the rest of us. Risk. Failure. Discipline. Networking. Grind. I cringed writing that one, not gonna lie. I didn't figure it out that night. But I did fall into a rabbit hole of TED Talks, podcasts, and watching billionaires be interviewed while sitting cross-legged on expensive rugs. And the funny thing? They all kept circling around the same concept. Not a strategy. Not a system. A mindset. And then, somewhere between watching a neuroscientist explain dopamine cycles and a monk talk about purpose while sipping chai, it clicked. It wasn't the word success they viewed differently. It was the word enough. Yeah. That one. Because here's the thing, most of us are living like we're being chased by the word enough. Like it's a moving target we're never allowed to reach. I'll be happy when I'm good enough. I'll rest when I've done enough. I'll feel like I matter when I'm enough. But successful people? They start with enough. They decide they're enough, and build from there, not toward it. That blew my mind. Because I'd been doing it backward for years. I thought achieving would lead to feeling worthy. But what if feeling worthy first was the key to achieving better? Here's a fact about human intelligence. Studies show our brains operate more effectively when we feel safe and confident. In other words, believing we're already enough literally boosts performance. Of course, that feels unnatural, right? Like, isn't it lazy to feel like you're enough before you've earned it? Well, here's an open academic debate for you. Is self-worth supposed to be earned through external validation, or is it something you establish internally before results ever show up? Some psychologists argue that we perform better when we operate from a foundation of inherent worth, not to be confused with ego, but a calm, stable sense that I matter even if today goes badly. And let me tell you, the moment I started rethinking enough, weird stuff happened. Like, I said no to a project that looked impressive on paper but made me want to chew drywall. I started going on walks, without tracking my steps. I called my mom and didn't feel the need to prove I was doing great. Wombats poop in cubes. No real connection, but honestly, that's how my brain felt, trying to digest this new mindset, structured, weird, and full of surprises. I kept thinking, what if enough wasn't a finish line, but a starting point? And what if that's why I never felt successful before? Because I was trying to outrun a word I didn't understand. From that moment on, I made a quiet promise to myself. Not a public declaration, not a tattoo on my forehead. Just a whispered agreement in the mirror. You're already enough. Now act like it. And from there, everything began to shift. I didn't have the whole answer yet, not even close. But I knew this was the beginning. I didn't need a new strategy. I needed a new relationship, with one word. It's amazing how much of your life is built on an assumption you never stop to question. Mine. That the more I accomplished, the more I'd feel accomplished. Turns out, success built on a foundation of not enough feels a lot like climbing a ladder to nowhere. I used to wake up each day with this to-do list that looked more like a punishment than a plan. Gym at 6 a.m. Power smoothie by 7. Respond to every email with alarming politeness. Finish 3 major tasks before lunch. Oh, and somewhere in there. Maybe smile once. If time allows. And the wild part? I was winning. According to LinkedIn, anyway. But I didn't feel like I was succeeding. I felt like I was surviving a high-functioning burnout Olympics. Every achievement felt like it evaporated the moment it happened. I got the promotion. Great. Now what? I finished the project. Cool. Why don't I feel satisfied? I hit the goal. Neat. Where's that stupid dopamine everyone promised? The brain has something called hedonic adaptation. It means we quickly return to a baseline level of happiness no matter what external success we achieve. That's why even lottery winners go back to their usual mood levels within months. Winning changes your situation, not your settings. And suddenly, that explained so much. I wasn't a failure. I was addicted to a broken model. There's an academic debate about whether fulfillment comes from achievement itself or the pursuit of something meaningful. Some researchers argue that people derive more satisfaction from the process of doing something challenging than from the outcome. Others think we've just tricked ourselves into romanticizing the struggle. All I knew was this: every time I hit a goal, I moved the goalposts. There was this day I remember vividly. I had just finished a speaking gig that paid more in an hour than my first job paid in a month. I should have been on cloud 9. Instead, I was in a hotel room, sitting on the edge of the bed, Googling, why don't I feel successful after success? No joke. That was my actual search history. The results were as vague as you'd expect: practice gratitude. Visualize your goals. Celebrate small wins. I wanted to chuck my phone into the minibar. But as I stared at the search bar, a weird memory popped into my head. It was me, at 10 years old, winning second place in a school science fair. I made a volcano that erupted glitter. Totally unnecessary. But I remember that feeling, not of winning, but of believing I made something cool. I ran around showing it off like it was the eighth wonder of the world. Nobody had to validate it. Nobody had to clap. I just loved it. I didn't feel like I had to do it. I wanted to. That was the difference. Back then, my goals weren't driven by anxiety. They were powered by curiosity. I missed that. So I tried something. The next day, instead of attacking my to-do list like it had insulted my ancestors, I asked myself, what would I do today if I believed I was already enough? And yeah, I know, sounds like something printed on a mug in a yoga studio. I didn't cancel all my meetings or throw my laptop into the ocean. I still had responsibilities. But I approached them differently. I didn't need them to prove my worth. I just did them. With less panic. With more peace. And guess what? I actually got more done. Sharks never stop moving, not because they're hyper but because some species literally can't breathe unless they're in motion. If they stop, they suffocate. I think a lot of us live like mental sharks, moving constantly, afraid that if we pause, we'll lose our edge or be exposed as frauds. But what if we're not sharks? What if we're more like whales, capable of surfacing, breathing deeply, and then diving back in? I started letting myself surface. No agenda. No performance. Just space. And that space. It started revealing things. Like the fact that I was surrounding myself with people who only saw me as valuable when I was producing. That my calendar was full of obligations I didn't even remember agreeing to. That I hadn't done something fun, like, actually fun, for the sake of fun in over a year. You want a wake-up call? Try looking at your schedule and realizing there's no joy on it. Just goals, goals, and more goals. That's not ambition. That's a slow-motion panic attack disguised as productivity. So I pulled back. I said no to a brand deal I would have begged for 6 months earlier. I skipped a networking event that felt more like speed dating for LinkedIn. I took a random Thursday afternoon and went to a museum by myself. I wandered past sculptures, drank overpriced coffee, and remembered what it was like to be interested in life again. And then something truly weird happened. I started attracting better opportunities. Ones that aligned with me. Not just the shiny stuff, but work that felt less like grinding and more like growing. Because when you stop chasing success from a place of lack, it starts showing up in ways that actually fulfill you. I'm not saying it all changed overnight. I didn't become an inner peace influencer or start wearing flowy pants and burning sage, though, honestly, the pants are tempting. But I did start living by one quiet, rebellious thought. I'm enough. Let's build from there. And that was the moment I stopped confusing movement with momentum. It's not about doing more. It's about doing from the right place. You ever have breakfast with someone who seems like they live in a parallel universe? Yeah. That happened to me. Now, I should clarify, it wasn't a planned, linen tablecloth kind of breakfast. It was a spontaneous, cramped corner table at a diner type of thing. And the guy I sat across from? He wasn't famous. Not in a household name kind of way. But let's just say, he could have bought the whole diner and not noticed. He wore a t-shirt. Like a faded, wrinkly one. The kind you'd expect to see on a college freshman who just discovered the laundry room. He ordered black coffee and pancakes like he wasn't managing millions. I asked him what he did for a living, and he said, I make problems go away. Vague. Suspicious. Kinda cool. I liked it. We started talking, well, more like I talked and he nodded. He let me ramble about what I was working on, the hustle, the grind, the endless to-do lists. Then I asked him what the key to success was. Just casually. Like, no pressure. Enlighten me between bites of hash browns. He paused, looked up, and said, you keep using the wrong word. Now, that caught me off guard. I wasn't even using any particularly fancy words at the time. Just your standard jargon salad, productivity, scalability, growth. He said it again. Wrong word. It's like you're building with broken bricks. And I blinked at him like he'd just recited a poem in Morse code. Then he smiled, not smugly, but like someone who knows where the exit door is in a burning building, and said, you think success is a destination. I don't. I think it's a lens. I chewed on that. Both figuratively and literally. A lens? I asked. He nodded. You ever try taking a photo with the wrong lens? You either miss the detail or the whole picture. Most people are zoomed in on the wrong things. That hit. Because, honestly, he was right. I'd been zoomed in on proof, titles, deadlines, income, followers. All the things that show up nicely in a bio. But I hadn't zoomed out in ages to ask, do I even like where I'm pointing the camera? Our brains are naturally wired for pattern recognition and goal-oriented behavior, but we often confuse metrics for meaning. It's why someone can earn a promotion and still feel empty. The brain got the goal, but not the why. That's the danger of the wrong word, it narrows your lens. Now, here's an odd fact, octopuses have 9 brains. One main brain and a mini brain in each arm. I mention this because it felt like my arms were moving on their own for years, checking boxes and taking calls while my real brain was quietly panicking behind the scenes. So back at that diner table, I asked the guy what his word was. What he thought differently that helped him operate the way he did. He said, curious. Just that. Curious. You want to win? He asked. Stay curious. Not desperate. Not certain. Curious. Now, curiosity isn't a revolutionary concept, but the way he meant it was different. He didn't mean, read more books, or, ask more questions. He meant replace expectation with exploration. Instead of asking, how do I win this game, ask, what happens if I play it differently? That's what successful people do. They don't just ask better questions, they ask weirder ones. The kind that make your brain go, wait, what? Because those questions lead to new angles, new opportunities, and sometimes, completely new rules. There's an academic debate about this too, whether curiosity is a fixed trait or something you can build like a skill. Some say it's a personality thing. Others argue that it's like a muscle. The more you train it, the better your problem-solving and adaptability become. I believe it's both. And I know for sure that I hadn't been training mine. I'd been focused on certainty. Control. Answers. The opposite of curiosity. That conversation stayed with me. Long after the coffee ran out and the guy disappeared back into whatever billionaire portal he came from, I sat there staring into my cold plate of eggs, thinking about how many areas of my life I approached with rigidity. My relationships, scripted. My goals, templated. My day-to-day, choreographed chaos. I wasn't exploring. I was executing. So I tried something small. That weekend, I went to a bookstore without a plan. No business books. No leadership guides. I walked the aisles like a tourist, touched the covers, flipped through random pages, and walked out with a novel about an Italian baker who solves crimes with bread. Yes, really. And I read it. Not for growth. Not for insights. Just for fun. Guess what happened? Ideas started bubbling up. Solutions to problems I hadn't solved in months just started appearing. Like my brain was defrosting. Because curiosity doesn't just expand your knowledge, it relaxes your brain. And a relaxed brain is an innovative brain. Suddenly I wasn't just doing work, I was reimagining it. I stopped asking, how do I get ahead, and started asking, what if there's a better path altogether? I tried launching a side project with no expectation. I sent a weird email to an industry peer just to see what they'd say. I stopped turning every hobby into a potential business opportunity. Okay, tried to stop. And the craziest part? I started liking myself more. Because when you stop performing, you rediscover your weird, wonderful instincts. You make space for the part of you that wonders, what if, instead of, what now? I didn't realize it at the time, but that breakfast was a turning point. Not because I met someone rich or wise. But because I was reminded that success isn't always earned by working harder, sometimes, it's about seeing differently. And for me, that meant replacing pressure with curiosity. That was the first lens adjustment. There would be more. But that morning, over lukewarm syrup and a single word, my whole frame began to shift. It took me an embarrassing amount of time to realize the word that most people misuse daily, especially the ambitious types who alphabetize their goals and color-code their calendars. The word? Try. Yeah, that one. Tiny. Harmless looking. Shows up in nearly every motivational poster or self-help book. Try your best. Try until you succeed. Try and try again. Sounds noble, right? Until you realize how it's secretly sabotaging everything. Let me explain. I used to try a lot. I'd try to wake up early. Try to be more disciplined. Try to network more. Try to stop checking my phone every 5 minutes like I was waiting for news of a moon landing. And here's what I discovered about myself, and maybe you too. When I said I was going to try, what I really meant was, I'm going to do this, as long as it's easy, immediate, and Instagrammable. I wasn't trying. I was considering. I was flirting with the idea of commitment while leaving the door slightly open, just in case something more comfortable came along. But then I noticed something strange. Whenever I asked genuinely successful people how they achieved something, they never used the word try. They'd say, I'm doing it. Or, I decided to. Or, I committed. Not once did they say, well, I'm trying to build a business, or, I'm trying to write a book. They were all in. Not testing the water with one toe while holding onto the shore. The language you use shapes your behavior. There's a psychological principle called linguistic determinism, which basically means that how you speak influences how you think. If you say, try, you think in temporary, conditional terms. That blew my mind. I started noticing it everywhere. Even in my texts, I'll try to make it. Translation, I already don't want to go, and I'm giving you a heads up. Or, I'll try to be more productive. Translation, I'll continue as usual, but now with a layer of guilt frosting. The word was a cushion, a built-in excuse. Bananas are technically berries, but strawberries aren't. That's how messed up classification can be when we rely on surface definitions. Try sounds like action, but it's often just hesitation in a trench coat. So I made a rule. A weird one. I banned myself from saying, try, for a whole week. Every time I caught myself using it, I had to replace it with something definite. I'm writing today, instead of, I'll try to write. I'm working out at 6, instead of, I'll try to go to the gym. At first, it felt cocky. Like I was overpromising. But then I realized it was just uncomfortable because it left no exit ramp. It forced me to own my choices. And something wild happened. I actually followed through. Not because I suddenly had more willpower or a caffeine-4 drip, but because I wasn't giving myself mental wiggle room. Try had been my escape hatch. Close it, and I stayed on the ship. There's an open academic debate about whether commitment leads to motivation or the other way around. Some psychologists argue you need a spark of motivation before you commit. Others insist that commitment itself creates the motivation. From what I've experienced, the commitment has to come first. I mean, when you sign a lease, you don't try to pay rent. You just do it. Same goes for commitments that matter. This mindset even crept into how I approached relationships. I stopped saying, I'll try to be a better listener, and started saying, I'm listening now. And let me tell you, people notice when you replace vague intentions with present action. I remember a client once emailed me asking if I could maybe try to pull together a draft by Friday. I replied, I will send it Friday morning. They responded with a virtual high five and said, that's why we work with you. All I did was remove the mushy middle of try. We live in a culture obsessed with effort, but allergic to commitment. Everyone's trying something, new routines, side hustles, self-improvement plans, but few are deciding. Here's the thing, try lets you fail quietly. Do demands you grow publicly. It doesn't mean you won't mess up. You will. I did. Multiple times. But the shift in mindset changes how you respond to setbacks. When I used to try something and it didn't work, I'd say, well, I gave it a shot. And walk away. Now, if something doesn't work, I say, okay, that didn't go as planned, what's next? That subtle difference. It's everything. And you want to know the weirdest benefit? I started respecting myself more. I didn't realize how much I'd internalized the try mentality until I noticed how often I let myself down. Tiny promises I never kept. Micro abandonments. Each try was like a silent contract I was too scared to sign. But when I swapped it for certainty, even small, humble certainty, I began to trust my own word again. That builds momentum. And momentum is powerful. It's like pushing a boulder at first, heavy, slow, awkward. But once it's rolling, even a small nudge keeps it going. And the people around you? They notice. They trust you more. They stop seeing you as someone who means well and start seeing you as someone who follows through. So if you're stuck in your life, ask yourself. Where am I saying try when I should be saying do? What am I half in on that needs a full yes, or a full no? It sounds simple. It is simple. But it's also the kind of shift that can turn a wandering mindset into a laser-focused engine. Next time someone asks you if you're working on something, don't say, I'm trying. Say, I'm doing it. Even if you're terrified. Especially then. If there's one thing that rattled my soul more than the word try, it was this seemingly harmless phrase. I have to. It's everywhere, right? You probably said it today. I have to go to work. I have to finish this report. I have to call my mom. I have to drink more water because apparently being hydrated is trendy now. And I said it, too. Constantly. Like some sort of productivity chant for the perpetually exhausted. But here's the part that wrecked me, every time I said, I have to, I was lying to myself. Because truthfully, I chose to. Nobody had me handcuffed to my laptop. No boss had installed a shock collar on my inbox. And as much as my mom deserves a call, she's not threatening to cut me out of the will if I skip a Tuesday. So why did it feel like I was living under mandatory obligation 24/7? Because language is sneaky like that. I have to is one of those phrases that turns choices into chains. And when you repeat it enough, your brain starts to believe you're a victim of your own calendar. Here's a human intelligence fact to back it up: our internal dialogue directly affects our perceived autonomy. Psychologists call it locus of control. People with an internal locus believe they're in charge of their lives. People with an external one think life just happens to them. Guess which group reports higher happiness, better health, and even longer lifespans? Yeah. The ones who own their choices, even the hard ones. So I tried an experiment. Yes, I said tried, don't call me out, it's fine this time. For one whole week, I replaced I have to with I get to. I get to go to work. I get to answer this email. I get to clean my apartment so I don't start losing forks. At first, it felt absurd. Like, who am I, Oprah on a gratitude bender? But slowly, something shifted. I started noticing which tasks I was genuinely grateful for, and which ones felt like soul erosion. And then I took it further, I replaced I have to with I choose to. Now that one stings. It puts the spotlight directly on your agency. Suddenly, I have to stay up late working becomes I choose to prioritize this project over sleep. I have to go to this awkward networking event turns into I choose to show up because I think this connection might be valuable. Every time I said I choose to, I had to confront why. Sometimes the answer was I actually don't want this at all. And that realization, it's a lifesaver. There's an academic debate surrounding choice overload. the idea that modern humans have too many choices, and it's making us anxious and unhappy. But personally, I think it's not the number of choices that overwhelm us, it's the lack of ownership over the ones we already made. Because when everything feels like an obligation, nothing feels like a decision. Sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins. No idea what to do with that, but it kind of reminds me of how long I used to hold my breath through tasks I didn't enjoy. Just powering through, waiting to come up for air. Only, I never came up. I just moved to the next have to. One morning, I was getting ready for a Zoom meeting with a client who, frankly, made me want to file an emotional restraining order. I stood in front of my mirror, tie half done, and said, I have to get on this call. Then I corrected myself, I choose to take this call. And it hit me like a philosophical frying pan, why am I choosing this? The answer? Because I don't want to disappoint them. Not because I care about the work. Not because I believe in the mission. Just, fear of disappointing someone I didn't even respect that much. That was a sobering moment. I cancelled the contract 2 days later. And yeah, I was nervous about the money. About the gap in my schedule. About looking flaky. But the mental space I reclaimed. Worth every awkward email. This one language tweak, owning your choices, doesn't make life easier. It makes it clearer. It forces you to align your actions with your values, not just your fears. And that's when my schedule started changing. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But piece by piece, I started deleting things that felt like have to, and replacing them with things that were true choose tos. I took weekends off. Like, actually off. No sneaky emails. No pretending that quick check-ins didn't count. I reconnected with an old friend over coffee just because I wanted to. And I turned down a speaking gig at a very fancy conference because deep down, I didn't believe in what they stood for. You know what happened? Nothing exploded. The world didn't collapse. My bank account didn't shrivel up. In fact, I started attracting work that felt more aligned. People noticed the shift in my energy. I was showing up fully, not resentfully. Because when you own your choices, your presence becomes cleaner. More authentic. Less frantic. That's not some woo-woo energy thing, it's just human psychology. When your brain believes you're in control, it stops fighting everything. You stop resisting your life and start living it. So I'll leave you with this. The next time you catch yourself saying, I have to. Stop. Take a breath. Replace it with, I choose to. And if that feels gross, if that makes your stomach twist, listen to that. Because that little twist, that's your compass. Follow it. It might just lead you to a life you're not trying to escape from every Monday morning. There's a particular kind of panic that hits when you realize you've built your life around being busy, only to discover that busy and meaningful are not the same thing. I was on the phone with a friend, an old college buddy who now works for a non-profit, lives in a modest 2-bedroom house, and somehow always sounds calm. It's honestly a little unnerving. I was pacing around my apartment, ranting about my latest jam-packed week, and I remember saying, man, I'm just so busy I can barely think. He paused and asked, do you mean full or just loud? I stopped in my tracks. What? He said, is your life full of things you care about? Or is it just full of noise? Cue internal existential explosion. Because that was exactly it. My days weren't full, they were loud. Overbooked, overcomplicated, overnoised. Filled with meetings that led nowhere, tasks that nobody would remember, and obligations that I'd convinced myself were non-negotiable. I was drowning in volume, not value. We confuse movement with momentum. We wear busy like it's a badge of honor. A way to signal importance, productivity, relevance. I'm slammed. My calendar's a mess. I haven't sat down all day. We say these things with a mix of pride and exhaustion, as if being perpetually overwhelmed is proof that we matter. The brain is not designed to operate efficiently under constant stimulation. It thrives on focused attention. When it's flooded with input, constant noise, constant motion, it stops processing deeply and starts reacting shallowly. It's like trying to have a meaningful conversation in the middle of a rock concert. Cows have best friends and get stressed when separated from them. I found that out while doom scrolling during a 5-minute break that somehow lasted 47 minutes. But the point is, connection matters more than chaos, even to cows. So I started auditing my noise. That week, I printed out my calendar, yes, on actual paper like it was 2003, and I went through it hour by hour. For each block, I asked 2 questions. 1. Does this matter? 2. Does this matter to me? The results were terrifying. So many yes answers to number 1. So few to number 2. I realized I was living someone else's priorities. Taking calls I didn't need. Writing reports no one read. Saying yes because I didn't want to deal with the awkwardness of a no. I was spending my life in reaction mode. There's a hot academic debate about whether modern life's pace is creating a crisis of attention. Some experts argue that our decreasing ability to focus is eroding not just our productivity, but our sense of self. When you never slow down long enough to think clearly, you start losing track of why you're even doing what you're doing. So I made a decision that felt radical at the time. I stopped answering every email. Now, before someone reports me to the productivity police, let me explain. I didn't ghost people. I just stopped treating my inbox like a fire alarm. I created filters, batched responses, and stopped checking it 20 times a day like it owed me money. And the world? Shockingly, it kept spinning. Then I did something even crazier. I took a full weekend off without checking my phone. I deleted the apps. Turned off notifications. Bought a puzzle like I was a retiree in Florida and just disconnected. The silence was deafening. But also beautiful. I found myself thinking actual thoughts, not just reacting to inputs. I read a book. I made pasta from scratch. I called a friend and didn't check the time once. For the first time in months, my brain didn't feel like a browser with 97 tabs open. And that gave me a new word to focus on: space. Not just physical space, but mental space. Emotional space. Room to breathe, to wonder, to just be without performing. Because sometimes clarity doesn't come from adding more, it comes from subtracting. So I started carving out space on purpose. I blocked 1 hour a day for nothing. Literally labeled it nothing in my calendar. No meetings. No phone. No goals. Just space. At first, it made me twitchy. I kept thinking I was forgetting something. But after a few days, I started looking forward to it like a vacation inside my own day. And in that space, new ideas started appearing. Insights that I'd been too busy to notice before. Creative solutions to old problems. Even memories I hadn't accessed in years, like old files suddenly unearthed from a dusty drawer in my brain. Turns out, your mind's like a room. If there's clutter everywhere, you can't find the good stuff. And you can't organize your thoughts if you never stop moving long enough to hear them. So here's my challenge to you, if you're brave enough to accept it. Audit your noise. Not just the literal sound, but the digital, emotional, mental clutter. What apps scream for your attention? What people demand energy you don't have? What tasks look urgent but mean nothing? Ask yourself, am I choosing this? Or am I just too scared to stop? Because here's what I learned the hard way. Silence isn't laziness. Space isn't weakness. Rest isn't failure. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is nothing at all. So go ahead. Mute the notifications. Block the hour. Cancel the non-essential. And give yourself permission to be quiet. You might be surprised what shows up in the silence. There's something oddly terrifying about an empty page. You sit there, staring at it, fingers twitching above the keyboard, and suddenly your brain becomes a parade of unrelated thoughts. Should I buy a new toothbrush? Is cereal technically soup? Why do dogs hate vacuum cleaners but love garbage? That blank space feels like judgment. Like it's quietly saying, "So, you got nothing, huh?" And I used to think that meant I was failing. But then something weird happened. I met someone who loved the blank page. They called it possibility. They said, that space. It's not emptiness. It's freedom. At first, I wanted to punch them in the nose. In a gentle, respectful way. But then I started thinking, what if that's true? What if our discomfort with starting comes from trying to get it right instead of getting it moving? See, I was stuck in a cycle of perfection paralysis. You know the one. You want the first sentence to be amazing. The idea to be fully formed. The plan to be bulletproof. But that's not how human intelligence works. Our brains are designed to learn through iteration, not execution. Meaning, we don't think our way into perfect action, we act our way into better thinking. The inventor of the microwave discovered it by accident. He was standing too close to radar equipment when a candy bar in his pocket melted. That's how imperfect discovery can be. So I stopped trying to make the perfect plan and started making any plan. I called it ugly momentum. That's when I learned the phrase that changed how I approach almost everything now. Start ugly. Start before you're ready. Before you're confident. Before you've watched 12 more videos on how to do it better. Because waiting to start until you're perfect is just procrastination in a tuxedo. I tested this with writing. Normally I'd plan, outline, procrastinate, take a break, accidentally, clean the kitchen, then panic write at 2 a.m. when my cortisol peaked. Instead, I sat down and wrote whatever came to mind. No outline. No rules. It was a disaster. But it was done. And once it existed, I could fix it. That's the secret. You can't edit a blank page. You can't steer a parked car. You can't improve a thing that doesn't exist. There's an open academic debate about whether creativity is more inspiration or perspiration. Does genius arrive in a lightning bolt, or does it come from just showing up and doing the work? I believe it's both, but only if you start ugly. Because the magic isn't in the beginning. It's in the refining. And you don't get to refine what you won't dare to begin. So I applied it to other areas. I started a fitness routine with no plan. Just 15 minutes of whatever I felt like, jogging, push-ups, yoga, interpretive dance. You're welcome, neighbors. The point wasn't to be impressive. It was to show up. And that built momentum. Then I cleaned out my closet, randomly, chaotically, just pulling stuff I hated and throwing it in a pile. No Marie Kondo, no folding method. Just ugly starting. And somehow, the room looked better. The air felt clearer. My brain felt lighter. Because the weight we carry isn't always the task itself. It's the not doing of the task. We're not overwhelmed because life is hard, we're overwhelmed because we're trying to do it perfectly, silently, and all at once. So I gave myself permission to start things poorly. And guess what? Some of those ugly starts turned into beautiful endings. A blurry video I shot with bad lighting got more engagement than the polished ones. A half-formed blog post I almost didn't publish became the foundation of my next big project. A spontaneous text to an old friend rekindled one of the most meaningful connections in my life. And all of it started ugly. There's a phrase I repeat to myself now, kind of a mantra when the anxiety of starting creeps in. Messy progress beats perfect hesitation. So if you're waiting for the perfect time, the perfect conditions, the perfect mindset, stop. There is no perfect moment. Only this one. And this one? It's pretty damn capable. If you don't believe me, just try this. Pick one thing you've been postponing. Something simple. Something that's been sitting in your mental inbox with the subject line, maybe later. Now, start it. Right now. Badly. Don't strategize. Don't overthink. Just make the first move. Send the email. Draft the headline. Put on the shoes. Open the document. Say the thing. And then, watch what happens. Because here's the truth I finally embraced. Every incredible thing I've done in my life started as something awkward, half-baked, and slightly embarrassing. But I did them anyway. Because, done and ugly, beats, imagined and perfect, every time. I used to believe that successful people were fundamentally different from the rest of us. Like they had some kind of secret software installed at birth, something that made them wake up with a six-pack, a TED Talk outline, and perfectly calibrated ambition. Meanwhile, I was still trying to figure out how to reheat pizza without making the crust chewy. But the more I got to know people I considered successful, the more I listened, really listened, I noticed something strange. They all had one thing in common. No, it wasn't discipline. Not genius. Not a 4 a.m. morning routine involving Himalayan salt and cold plunges. It was how they responded to failure. Not the motivational poster kind of failure. I mean real, faceplant on concrete, hope-crushing, publicly awkward failure. The kind that makes you question your life choices and your haircut. And here's what they did that I didn't. They treated failure like a data point, not a death sentence. Where I would spiral, replay the mistake, dissect it, turn it into a personality trait, they would pause, process, extract a lesson, and move on. Not in a pretend it didn't happen way, but in a this is valuable information way. It reminded me of how pilots treat turbulence. Did you know the average commercial flight hits some turbulence almost every trip? But the pilots? Calm. Focused. Adjusting. Not screaming into the radio, well, guess we're all doomed. They use the feedback and recalibrate. Octopuses have 3 hearts. One stops beating when they swim. Weird, yes, but also a reminder that even in nature, moving forward sometimes requires parts of you to pause. Same with failure. You don't need to power through it like nothing happened. You just need to not stay stuck in it. Here's a relevant fact from psychology: people with a growth mindset, the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed, recover from failure faster. They reframe setbacks as challenges, not confirmations of inadequacy. And that shift changes everything. I'll never forget the time I bombed a presentation. Like, full body cringe bombed. Tech didn't work. I stumbled over my own intro. Someone literally fell asleep. Not metaphorically. Like, head down, soft snore, actual sleep. Old me would have gone full hermit. Hidden under blankets. Cancelled everything. Maybe faked a dental emergency for 6 months. But I tried something different. I sat down the next day and wrote myself a memo. Not a pity party. Not a roast session. Just, what worked, what didn't, what I learned. And I found gold. I realized I was too reliant on slides. That I skipped rehearsal. That I hadn't really considered my audience, just my agenda. Painful? Yes. But it was also clarifying. So the next time, I adapted. I built in tech backups. I opened with a story. I rehearsed like a maniac. It wasn't perfect, but it was night and day better. And it wouldn't have happened without that spectacular flop. There's an open academic debate about whether resilience is built or born. Is it something you develop, or something that comes hardwired? I don't know the full answer, but I do know this: every time you bounce back, you make it easier to bounce next time. It's like muscle memory. Emotional push-ups. And the only way to build it, is to fail more. Which sucks. Truly. No one likes it. If anyone tells you they love failing, they're either lying or selling something. But the key difference is this. Unsuccessful people avoid failure. Successful people study it. They track patterns. Ask questions. Make tweaks. They know the lesson might be hidden in the wreckage. So now, whenever something flops, I do what I call the debrief. I ask. What did I expect to happen? What actually happened? What did I miss? What would I do differently next time? No drama. No blame. Just analysis. It's like being your own sports coach. Sure, the team lost. But what did the footage reveal? That's how you move from feeling like a failure, to thinking like a scientist. Because here's the real secret, successful people don't fear failure. They fear not learning from it. They know failure is not an identity. It's a snapshot. A moment. A bump in the road, not the whole road. And when you learn how to metabolize failure, something powerful happens. You become braver. Not because you expect to win. But because you're no longer afraid to lose. That's what frees you up to try bold things, take weird chances, make art, start businesses, build relationships. Because now, even if it goes sideways, you know how to pick up the pieces. You've done it before. You'll do it again. So here's what I want you to try. Think back to a failure, big or small, that still stings a little. Now, instead of cringing, study it. What didn't you know then that you know now? What insight did it gift you? What resilience did it unlock? Write it down. Own it. Celebrate it. Because that failure, it didn't break you. It built you. If there's a word that used to trigger me harder than networking, it was should. I used to live in a kingdom ruled by should. I should wake up earlier. I should hustle harder. I should be more grateful. I should post more. I should call that guy back even though the conversation last time made me feel like I was trapped in a LinkedIn message. It was like my whole life was run by an invisible boss named Shouldbert who barked orders from the back of my skull. But here's what I realized the hard way. Every should is a little judgment grenade. Sometimes it's self-judgment. I should have handled that better. I should be further along by now. Sometimes it's societal. You should settle down. You should want this promotion. You should stop eating cold pizza for breakfast like a college freshman. But none of it helps. See, the problem with should is that it's a word that sounds like motivation, but actually breeds guilt. It tricks you into believing that external expectations are internal truths. And the human brain? It doesn't respond well to shame-based language. In fact, neuroscience shows that shame shuts down the parts of the brain responsible for problem-solving and decision-making. So when you say should to yourself, you're literally short-circuiting your ability to do better. Pigeons can do basic math. Like, actually count. But even pigeons don't waste time on guilt trips. They just adjust and keep pecking. I envy them sometimes. There's also an academic debate around the role of guilt in behavior change. Some say guilt is necessary to keep us moral and socially attuned. Others argue that it only leads to self-sabotage and paralysis unless it's paired with compassion and agency. Me. I'm team, ditch the should, keep the soul. So I tried an experiment, again, my favorite way to sneak up on my own brain. For 1 week, I replaced every should in my thoughts with could. I could go to the gym. I could reach out to that contact. I could stay up late answering emails, or I could rest. At first it felt weird. Like I was dodging responsibility. But then I noticed something, the pressure started to melt. The guilt softened. And in its place, came clarity. Could gave me space to make a real decision. It handed the will back to me. Now, instead of dragging myself through days filled with shoulds, I started making honest choices. Choices I could stand behind. Or, at least, learn from. And here's the magic: when I stopped bullying myself with should, I actually did more. Not out of obligation. Out of alignment. I exercised not because I should, but because I wanted to feel strong. I worked harder on my projects not because I should, but because I felt connected to their purpose. I called my mom because I wanted to hear her laugh, not because it was Sunday and the calendar told me I should. You see the difference? Should is externally imposed. Could is internally chosen. And when you stack your life with choices instead of guilt trips, you stop being a passenger. You start being a participant. Of course, old habits die hard. One day I caught myself saying, I should be more productive today, as I stared blankly at a half-eaten burrito at 3 p.m. But instead of spiraling, I paused and said, nope. Let's try that again. I could focus more today, if I take a quick walk and clear my head. See? No drama. No internal scolding. Just curiosity and course correction. Honestly, the best way to beat should is to ask a simple question. Says who? I started doing that whenever a should popped up in my brain. I should post more on social media. Says who? The algorithm? A guru with a ring light? My ego? I should be making 6 figures by now. Says who? My high school rival's LinkedIn feed? Once you start interrogating the should, you start realizing how many of them don't even belong to you. They're inherited. Absorbed. Downloaded from other people's definitions of success. And that's when you get to do the best kind of adulting, deleting rules you never agreed to. Of course, not all shoulds are evil. Sometimes they're just poorly phrased signals from your values. If you find yourself thinking, I should spend more time with my kids, maybe the truth underneath is, I want to feel more connected. If you say, I should stop doom scrolling, maybe what you mean is, I miss feeling focused and present. So reframe it. Find the desire behind the duty. Because desire fuels action. Guilt only fuels avoidance. And when you start replacing should with want, need, could, or choose, your brain stops resisting and starts responding. You shift from obligation to ownership. That's what successful people do, whether they know it or not. They don't run on guilt. They run on clarity. They know that real power isn't in living up to some invisible standard. It's in building a life that actually feels like yours. So next time you catch yourself should ing all over your day, stop. Take a breath. Swap the word. Choose the action. And if all else fails, remember the pigeons. They're out there. Counting. Flying. Refusing to feel guilty about crumbs. Maybe we can learn a thing or two. The first time I said no and didn't feel a crushing wave of guilt afterward, I half expected a bolt of lightning to strike me down. But it didn't. Turns out, boundaries don't actually kill people. They just confuse the ones who've benefited from you not having any. You see, for a long time, I thought saying no was the same as being rude, selfish, or, worst of all, disappointing. And if there was one thing I excelled at, it was avoiding disappointment at all costs. I'd say yes to things I didn't want to do. Projects that drained me. Invitations I dreaded. Even favors I barely had the energy for. I became a master at smiling while secretly plotting my own disappearance. And you know what that leads to? Resentment. Burnout. Fake laughing at jokes you don't even understand. Then I had a conversation with someone I deeply admired, one of those low-key successful types who seems to have their calendar, and cortisol, completely under control. I asked how they managed to juggle everything so effortlessly. They leaned back, sipped their tea like a wise old monk, and said, I say no. A lot. I blinked. But how do you get away with that? I asked. They smiled. I stopped thinking of no as rejection. I started thinking of it as resource management. That hit me harder than it should have. Because here's the truth, every yes is a loan against your time, energy, and attention. If you say yes to everything, eventually, you go bankrupt. From a human intelligence standpoint, decision fatigue is real. Studies show that the more decisions you make throughout the day, the worse your judgment gets. So every unnecessary yes chips away at your mental sharpness. Sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins. Yeah. The slowest land mammal beats Flipper at deep breathing. Makes you wonder what else we're getting wrong by going too fast. And there's an open academic debate about how saying no impacts social dynamics, especially in work environments. Some argue it isolates you, while others claim it enhances respect and influence. My vote? It depends on how you say it. So I practiced. At first, I did the polite tap dance. I'd love to, but I'm super swamped. Maybe next time. I'm not sure I'll be able to swing that, but let me check. But eventually, I tried something terrifying. A direct no, thank you. And nothing exploded. No one cried. The earth didn't crack open. The email didn't catch fire. Actually, it felt kind of good. Clean. Respectful. Like I'd just vacuumed my own brain. And the more I did it, the stronger I got. I stopped filling my schedule with things that made me tired before I even got to them. I stopped apologizing for protecting my peace. And I started saying yes to things I actually wanted to do, things that lit me up instead of dimming me down. The trick, I found, was in the why behind the no. It wasn't, I don't want to help. It was, I want to help in ways that align with what I can give without burning out. Big difference. Because a successful life isn't one where you say yes to everything. It's one where you say yes to the right things, and mean it. One of the best tools I adopted is what I call the 2-second gut check. When a request comes in, whether it's an invite, a favor, or an opportunity, I ask myself, if this were happening tomorrow, would I still say yes? If my stomach flinches, it's a no. Sometimes I'll even say, let me get back to you, just to give myself space to think. Because the most expensive yes are the ones you give when you're afraid of saying no. I used to admire people who were always on. Always available. Always ready to jump in. Now, I admire people who know how to protect their bandwidth. People who don't treat burnout like a badge. People who respect themselves enough to create boundaries with a pulse, not walls, but filters. One day, I drew a chart, because yes, I'm that kind of person. On one axis, things I'm good at. On the other, things that give me energy. I realized a lot of the stuff I said yes to lived in the box labeled, good at, but drains me. So I asked, what if I built a life that leaned more into, good at and energizes me? It wasn't immediate. But it shifted my decisions. I turned down a high-paying gig that didn't align with my values. I said no to weekend plans when I needed solitude, even if it meant missing out. I let go of side projects that felt like side burdens. And you know what I gained? Focus. Clarity. Even a little peace. So if you're still stuck in yes mode, let me say this gently. Saying no is not selfish. It's strategic. It's not about shutting the world out. It's about letting the right parts in. So try it. Say no to the thing you dread. The thing you're doing out of guilt or obligation. The thing that no longer fits who you're becoming. And then, say yes to the thing that does. Even if that thing is rest. Because boundaries aren't barriers. They're the shape of your freedom. You ever hear someone say, I just don't have the motivation today, and nod along like, yeah, me neither, as you both sink into the soft, judgment-free hug of your couch? That was me. All the time. I thought motivation was this mystical energy source. Something that appeared, like a lightning strike, when the stars aligned or Mercury wasn't in retrograde. I waited for it the way people wait for their food to cool down, knowing they won't, but pretending they might. Until one day, someone asked me a question that ruined my excuse game forever. What if motivation isn't the start of the engine, but the result? Cue mental record scratch. Because up until then, I treated motivation like a prerequisite. If it didn't show up, I didn't act. And surprise, surprise, I stayed stuck. Projects half-started. Books unread. Gym memberships wasted. Google Docs opened and closed with the same blank stare. But what if, the act of moving created the desire to move more? It turns out, human intelligence is wired in a surprisingly cooperative way. There's something called the progress principle, a psychological finding that shows how even small wins boost emotional engagement and motivation. Meaning, when you take a baby step, your brain rewards you with a burst of momentum. Sharks can't swim backward. They always have to move forward to stay alive. Same with humans, in a way. We just don't smell like fish when we stop. So I flipped the script. Instead of waiting for motivation, I decided to build momentum. I called it the 5-minute rule. I'd set a timer, start the thing I was avoiding, just for 5 minutes, and tell myself I could quit after. I rarely quit after. Because the hardest part of any task is the first 60 seconds. It's the ramp-up. The mental resistance. But I could also take a nap or organize my sock drawer by color part. But once you start, something happens. Your brain shifts. It stops anticipating pain and starts tracking progress. It stops catastrophizing and starts doing. That's when I realized successful people aren't necessarily more motivated. They're just better at creating frictionless starts. They don't say, "I'll write a book." They say, "I'll write for 10 minutes." They don't say, "I'll get fit." They say, "I'll stretch right now." They don't say, "I have to build an empire." They say, "Let me send one email." And those small starts create what I now call the self-trust loop. Here's how it works. 1. You take a small action. 2. Your brain rewards you for the win. 3. That win reinforces your identity. Hey, I'm someone who shows up. 4. That identity makes you more likely to act again tomorrow. Loop. 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 There's an open academic debate about the role of dopamine in behavior. Some argue it's about pleasure. Others say it's more about anticipation. Either way, action creates a chemical response that feels good. And that good feeling builds momentum. Which leads me to another key lesson. Motivation follows action, not the other way around. I stopped asking, "Do I feel like it?" And started asking, "What's one small thing I can do right now?" That tiny shift changed everything. Instead of binge-watching productivity videos, I became productive. Instead of buying more journals, I filled the ones I had. Instead of thinking about changing, I actually changed. Not dramatically. Not overnight. But steadily. I started using habit trackers, not as pressure tools, but as proof. I broke down tasks into absurdly small chunks. Instead of edit video, I wrote, open editing software. Because you can't build momentum around overwhelm. You build it around doability. You train your brain to trust you again. Which was the hardest part, honestly. Trusting myself. Because every time I broke a promise to myself, "I'll get up early, I'll finish that today, I won't scroll till 2 a.m." I chipped away at that self-trust. And trust is fuel. Without it, you'll stall, even when you want to move. So I started keeping smaller promises. I'll stretch for 2 minutes. I'll write a sentence. I'll clean one drawer. Tiny, manageable wins. And guess what? I started to believe myself again. I started feeling the pull of progress instead of the push of pressure. And that's what successful people know deep down. It's not about staying motivated all the time. It's about becoming a person who takes consistent, aligned action, even when it's tiny. Especially when it's tiny. So if you're sitting there, waiting for the feeling to strike, here's your gentle nudge. Don't wait. Move. Just a little. Do the smallest version of the thing you're avoiding. You don't need fireworks. You need a spark. And sparks are born from friction, just enough to light the path forward. Start small. Stay steady. Let momentum do the rest. There was a time I believed success belonged to people who were naturally talented. You know the ones. The friend who could draw perfectly at age 5. The classmate who picked up any sport like it was genetically coded into their DNA. The coworker who wrote reports that read like New Yorker essays, while you were still Googling how to unjam a printer. I thought talent was this magical, inherited lottery ticket. You either got one, or you didn't. And guess what? I spent a good chunk of my life assuming I didn't. I was average at most things. Okay at some. Terrible at math. Horrible at following IKEA instructions. I once cried building a bookshelf and now use it exclusively to hold snacks. So when I looked at successful people, I didn't see effort. I saw some kind of divine anointing. But one night, while doom-scrolling productivity forums, don't judge me, I came across something that made me sit up straight. Talent is often mistaken for repeated effort over time. That one sentence cracked something open. Because when I looked closer, really closer, at the people I admired, I realized their so-called talent was actually the result of thousands of microdecisions. Years of reps, unseen hours. They weren't born ready. They got ready. World-class chess players literally changed their brain structure through years of practice. MRI scans show different activity in areas associated with pattern recognition and memory. It's not just that they're smart, it's that they've trained differently. And there's an open academic debate about what matters more, innate ability or deliberate practice. You'll find research supporting both, but one thing's clear, even the most gifted people plateau without training. So I decided to run a little experiment. I picked something I wasn't naturally good at, public speaking. The old me. Nervous wreck. Dry mouth. Awkward hands. Sounded like a malfunctioning GPS. But instead of writing myself off as bad at it, I approached it like a skill. Step 1, I watched the greats. Not to copy them, but to study what worked. Step 2, I practiced aloud. A lot. In my car. In the shower. To my plants. My ficus knows my entire TEDx draft by heart. Step 3, I recorded myself. Cringeworthy? Yes. But also clarifying. I learned that I paused too long after jokes. My voice went up at the end of serious statements. I used the word basically like it was punctuation. So I refined. Week after week. I didn't get a standing ovation. But I did get better. And that, my friend, is what no one tells you about success. It's less about talent, and more about your willingness to be bad until you're good. That's where most people quit. We try something once, it goes poorly, and we tell ourselves, well, guess I'm not cut out for that. But that's not failure. That's data. And when you treat talent as a byproduct of practice instead of a prerequisite for trying, the whole world opens up. I started thinking of skills as sliders, like on a soundboard. Sure, some people start with their creative slider higher. But if you spend time on your resilience slider, your consistency slider, your humor under pressure slider, you can still play a killer track. The goal isn't to max out one setting. It's to learn how to mix them to make something uniquely yours. Also, fun fact, banana trees aren't technically trees. They're herbs. Giant herbs. Which just proves that sometimes what you think is a tree is actually a glorified leaf. Like talent. It looks solid, but it's often just flexible growth stacked up over time. And here's the kicker, thinking you need talent to begin is often just your brain's sneaky way of avoiding discomfort. Because being bad at something feels awful at first. It's vulnerable. It's slow. It's ego-crushing. But every master was once a disaster. Every polished presentation began as a messy, sweaty, muttered draft in front of a mirror. Every best-selling author once wrote a sentence so bad, their cat judged them. So if you've been holding back because you're not good enough, I get it. I've been there. But here's the truth I've learned again and again. You don't need to be amazing to start. You need to start to become amazing. I now take pride in being a beginner. In the wobbly steps. The awkward attempts. The learning curves. Because each one means I'm becoming someone who doesn't wait for permission to grow. And when people compliment me now, on my writing, my speaking, my projects, I smile. Not because I think I'm talented. But because I know I earned it. There was a point when every decision in my life felt like defusing a bomb. Do I take the job with the stable paycheck or follow the exciting, but risky, opportunity? Do I stay in this city or move to the one where I know no one but feel strangely drawn? Do I spend this weekend working toward my goals, or just rest because I'm one motivational quote away from a breakdown? Decisions paralyzed me. I'd make pros and cons lists so long they could double as a CVS receipt. I'd consult friends, then consult the friends of those friends. Sometimes I'd even consult my dog. He was non-committal but supportive. And still, I'd end up stuck, scrolling, second-guessing, and spiraling into the overthinking void. That all changed when I learned how successful people frame decisions, specifically how they think about the word choice. For me, choice used to mean risk. It meant leaving something behind. Closing a door. Making someone unhappy. It felt heavy, high stakes, permanent. But to successful people, choice isn't pressure. It's power. They don't frame choices as scary forks in the road. They see them as clarity filters, a way to define who they are, and who they're becoming. It turns out, the most mentally agile among us treat decisions like data points, not identity markers. That's a huge shift. I once read that expert chess players don't look for the perfect move, they look for a good enough move that advances their position. Why? Because perfection paralyzes. Progress compounds. We, non-grandmasters, would do well to follow that wisdom. There's an open academic debate about whether humans are better off with more or fewer choices. Some argue abundance equals freedom. Others argue too many options lead to decision fatigue, leaving us unhappy no matter what we pick. Personally, I've seen both sides. Like when I spent 45 minutes trying to choose a toothpaste at Target. So many flavors. So many promises. In the end, I left with mouthwash and zero toothpaste. Classic. The truth is, decisions are easiest when you know your values. And that's the piece I'd been skipping. I was trying to choose based on outcomes, money, status, comfort, instead of alignment. But when you ask, what kind of person do I want to become? What feeling do I want to multiply in my life? Which option moves me closer to that? Things get clearer. I started writing down my top 5 values on a sticky note and keeping it near my laptop. Mine looked something like this. 1. Autonomy. 2. Creativity. 3. Growth. 4. Impact. 5. Fun. Yes, fun, don't judge me. Now, every time a choice popped up, I'd ask. Does this get me more of these? If not, the answer was no. Simple. Was it perfect? Nope. But it was peaceful. Here's another weird trick I picked up, the 10-10-10 rule. When faced with a tough choice, ask. How will I feel about this in 10 minutes? In 10 months? In 10 years? That zoom out almost always exposes the drama for what it is, temporary discomfort. And that gave me courage. Like the time I turned down a freelance job that paid really well but would have sucked the joy out of me like a motivational vampire. 10 minutes after saying no, I panicked. 10 months later, I was working on something way better. 10 years from now, I'll probably only remember the peace, not the paycheck. Jellyfish have no brain, yet still manage to live long, stinging lives. Meanwhile, here we are, overthinking whether to hit send on an email. That's not to say every choice is easy. Some are excruciating. But once I started seeing them as experiments instead of endgames, the anxiety dropped. I started telling myself, this isn't permanent, it's a pivot. This isn't irreversible, it's information. This isn't life or death, it's a breadcrumb on the path. That made it feel safe to choose again. And again. And again. Because success isn't one giant leap in the right direction. It's a series of small choices, aligned over time, that create your unique trajectory. Now, when I look back at the major decisions I made, where to live, who to collaborate with, what to say yes or no to, I see a pattern. Not of certainty, but of curiosity, courage, and eventually, clarity. So if you're staring down a decision right now, frozen between this and that, here's what I'd tell you. Stop looking for the perfect choice. Start looking for the aligned one. Frame it not as a test of your intelligence, but as a reflection of your priorities. Because in the end, it's not about making a right choice. It's about becoming the kind of person who trusts themselves to choose again. You know what word used to drive me absolutely nuts? Luck. People would see someone doing well and say, they're just lucky. Or worse, they'd look at me, after I'd clawed my way through 5 layers of self-doubt and 137 abandoned projects, and casually throw out, wow, you're lucky that worked out. Excuse me? Did luck make me cry at 2 a.m. while figuring out how to file quarterly taxes? Did luck hit upload after 27 takes because I hated the sound of my own voice? Did luck answer emails, pitch clients, eat rejection like granola bars, and keep going? Nah. That wasn't luck. That was sweat in a fancier costume. But let me be honest. I didn't always think that way. There was a time I believed that some people just had it. A magical golden horseshoe somewhere in their DNA that made things fall into place. They got the lucky breaks. The lucky timing. The lucky email from that one person who could change their life. Meanwhile, I was stuck hoping lightning would strike. Here's what I learned, though, successful people don't wait for lightning. They build lightning rods. It turns out, what most people call luck is actually strategic positioning. Want to increase your chances of getting lucky? Show up more. Share more. Fail more. Learn faster. Stay ready. Luck has a funny way of noticing people who are already moving. Fun fact, in 2003, psychologist Richard Wiseman conducted a study on luck. He found that self-identified, lucky people were more observant, open to new experiences, and better at spotting opportunities than those who thought they were unlucky. It wasn't magic, it was mindset and movement. There's an open academic debate around this. Is luck truly random, or is it the emergent property of behavioral patterns? I'm no professor, but from my own painfully human experience, I'd bet my coffee that luck likes movers, not statues. I remember this time I applied for a dream gig I had absolutely no business getting. I wasn't qualified on paper, didn't have connections, and my cover letter had a typo. Yeah, that one stung. But I got the job. People said, wow, you're lucky. What they didn't see was the 3 years of unrelated projects that built my voice. The 100 rejections before that one yes. The late nights obsessively tweaking my portfolio for nobody but myself. That wasn't luck. That was compound courage. Another odd fact, in Japan, they have a word, ikigai, which means, a reason for being. It combines what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. When you live in your ikigai, people call you lucky. But really, you just aligned yourself so tightly with purpose that opportunities started recognizing you. It's not about hustle porn or grinding 24/7. It's about intentional exposure. You can't get picked if you don't play. You can't get discovered if you stay invisible. You can't stumble into your lucky break if you never go outside. Luck, I've found, isn't just about being at the right place at the right time. It's about being the right person, no matter the place or time. I started keeping a luck log to reframe how I saw serendipity. Every day, I wrote down one thing I created the conditions for. One risk I took. One connection I nurtured. Over time, I noticed a pattern. Luck didn't float down from the clouds. It showed up through people. Through preparation. Through persistence. One person shared my post that led to a referral. One failed video reached someone who hired me 6 months later. One awkward coffee meeting turned into a friendship that changed everything. But you don't always see that chain when you're in it. You just see the next step. So here's what I've learned. You don't need to be lucky. You need to be available to luck. You do that by saying yes before you feel ready. Showing your work, even if it's unfinished. Following up when your brain says, they probably forgot about you. Being so in motion that luck can't help but bump into you. The more I practiced this mindset, the more lucky I got. Not in lottery wins. But in synchronicities. In timing. In doors creaking open the moment I decided to knock again. And here's the kicker, once you start building your own luck, you become less bitter about other people's success. You stop seeing it as unfair. You start seeing it as possible. You realize we're not all fighting over one golden ticket. We're just out here collecting scraps of faith and stacking them into ladders. So if you're sitting there thinking success is about luck, let me whisper this in your ear. You're not unlucky. You're just early in the process. Build your lightning rod. Sharpen your skills. Stay in motion. And the next time someone calls you lucky, smile. Because they have no idea how much work went into looking that effortless. There's a weird quiet that happens when you finally get it. Not a fireworks moment. Not a ticker tape parade. Just a pause. A soft click. Like when a puzzle piece slides into place, not because you forced it, but because it always belonged there. That's what happened to me one Wednesday morning, when I was brushing my teeth and staring at my own reflection like I owed it rent. And I whispered to myself. Oh. It was never about being the best. It was about becoming me. Let's rewind. By that point, I'd been on this long, twisty, beautifully awkward journey of unlearning how I used to think, and relearning how successful people really think. I had shifted words. Reframed decisions. Rewired my view of talent. I'd stopped waiting for motivation and started building momentum. I'd redefined failure, shrunk my goals to make progress, and started asking better questions. But the final shift, the one that changed me in a way that felt cellular, was realizing that this whole thing was never about me, alone. It was about something bigger. You see, I had spent so much of my life obsessing over my own performance, my own path, my own worth, that I started to view success as a personal island. You win alone. You figure it out alone. You suffer alone. And one day, you shine alone. That's not how this works. Humans are wired for connection. Our intelligence, yes, our actual neural wiring, is deeply social. Empathy, language, memory recall, mirror neurons, all these things evolve best not in isolation, but in relationship. And yet, we treat self-improvement like a solo sport. Here's the odd twist: ants don't have bosses, but they build entire civilizations. Together. Without meetings or motivational speakers or LinkedIn posts. Why? Because they operate on instinct and cooperation. I'm not saying be an ant. I'm saying maybe don't always be a lone wolf with a vision board. There's an open academic debate about individualism versus collectivism and how it influences success across cultures. Western societies often frame success as individual triumph. But studies consistently show that communal support systems create longer-lasting impact and well-being. I started thinking, what if the goal of becoming successful isn't to lift myself higher, but to lift others with me? What if thinking differently wasn't about gaining an edge, but creating a bridge? That thought melted something in me. Suddenly, the pressure loosened. The self-comparison quieted. The need to prove dissolved. Because if your win makes someone else feel small, was it really a win? I started sharing more of what I'd learned, not as a guru or guide, but as a fellow human figuring stuff out. I mentored someone younger than me. I showed someone how to charge what they're worth. I recommended a friend for a job I didn't get. Each time, it felt like dropping pebbles into a still lake. Tiny ripples. Gentle echoes. And wouldn't you know it? Those ripples started circling back. Not immediately. But slowly. People started saying things like, "I read that thing you wrote, it helped me do this." Or, "That advice you gave. It worked. Thank you." Or even, "I didn't feel so alone because you said that out loud." That's when it clicked. The most successful people don't think differently just to win harder. They think differently so they can love louder. Build deeper. Show up better. They shift one word, one frame, one belief, so they can carry more, give more, and yes, be more. Not just for themselves. But for the next person climbing the same messy hill. So here I am, sitting with all the versions of me that used to feel not enough, not talented, not chosen. I want to hug them. I want to say, you weren't broken. You were just early. And now? Now I think differently. Because I know I'm not here to be lucky. I'm here to be useful. And maybe, just maybe, so are you. So go ahead. Pick one word. Shift it. Live into it. And let the world change because you did. Because at the end of it all, the difference between those who succeed and those who stay stuck isn't talent, luck, or even timing. It's that one word. And the courage to live it out. If you've made it this far, take a breath with me. Not a rushed one. A long, slow, shoulder-dropping breath. Because what we just walked through wasn't a how-to guide. It wasn't a lecture. It was a living, breathing unfolding of a thought, that successful people think just one word differently. Not because they're better. Not because they're born with more. But because they learn to reframe. They see failure as feedback. Busy as avoidance. Should as guilt. They treat motivation like a flame they start, not something they wait for. They make decisions from values, not fear. They know talent is often just the reward for refusing to quit. They stop chasing luck, and start designing for it. And most of all, they shift their thinking not to win for themselves, but to lift others through it. It's not loud. It's not flashy. But it's real. And it's available to you, right now. You don't have to fix everything today. You don't have to master all the steps. You just have to pick one word, and treat it with intention. Make it your own. Whisper it if you must. But let it guide you. Because success doesn't start with a big leap. It starts with one different thought. And the quiet bravery to believe it.